Well, hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today we are going to make terrain for Age of Sigmar. Now the first thing we're going to need is some Liquitex modeling putty, some grass flock, some ceramic stucco for looking like sand, a glue that's a gel because it holds better, some toothpicks, large quantities of cheap paint, black, brown, and gray, some thin cardboard, and of course a bunch of insulation foam. I still have about 2 by 4 feet from when I built my gaming table. And then finally we're going to use a pen, a razor knife, a saw, and an item that'll get you arrested in Great Britain. Okay, so overall what you want to do is first design just basically what the basic shapes of the terrain. Now for Age of Sigmar there are pieces of terrain that you can stand atop of or that slow you down, or can be just impassable. So with those three things in mind, I'm actually going to design my terrain based off of the terrain I have been using, and by what I've been using has been food, like spaghetti boxes, tin cans, stuff like that. I mean, you play with what you have. So the terrain pieces I'm having are going to be based off of the basic shapes of the food that I have been using, because it works well and it does well. So we start off first by marking the basic shapes, or the basic blocks of the terrain that we're going to use. When cutting through this foam, I find that first starting with the razor knife and making continuous cuts to get deeper and deeper in really does help, but unfortunately the big knife is not the best for slicing through, but it's kind of the best I got. And while the knife is the best I got, it still sucks. So I just keep cutting deeper with the razor blade, and eventually I sort of just kind of break it off in the end, after making some more slices on the other side, and then I got a chunk. I continue the process and mark off new areas and make sure first I start off by cutting out basically squares, blocks, rectangles, and then I'm going to stack them on top of each other to create more depth. And so I'm just going to make a bunch of basically rectangles and square shapes, and I'm going to cut those out. And after cutting out all the blocks for all the types of terrain that I want, it's time to move on. First, we need to start gluing some of these together. I'm going to start by taking toothpicks and stab them into some pieces. We will then apply a bunch of the gel glue onto it, and then we'll apply the other piece on top to seal it. Now, one thing to notice, this is a long step because the glue has to dry and it's going to take its sweet time. We're basically talking about do this before bed, and then you can continue this project the next day for the best, most solid seal. Alright, as we move on to the pieces that don't have to be glued together, we're going to take the saw and we're just going to start taking random chunks out of it. Big vertical chunks. We're not going to focus on curves or any specific details right now. We just want to remove material. Now these smaller pieces are basically just going to be like stone walls, like jutting out of the ground. Once we have a basic shape, we're going to take some simple sandpaper, which I forgot to mention, you need sandpaper. We're going to take some sandpaper, and then we're just going to smooth all this out. Now, warning, though, this stuff is poisonous and toxic to breathe, so wear a mask. Nowadays, that's kind of common. But also make sure that you're in a well-ventilated area and that you can clean up very well afterwards, because these things got everywhere. I don't show it, but basically I had to get a vacuum cleaner and the vacuum head nozzle thingy. And then I basically had to vacuum my entire area and my desk because these things were everywhere and they were a toxic hazard. So just be careful, or do this like maybe outside or someplace you can control, away from animals and small children. Alright, a day has passed-ish. I was a little hasty on this one, but basically for the tall towers, the ones that we stacked on, this one has 3 layers. We're just going to take the saw and we're going to start cutting corners. So don't tell Wendy's. But we're going to keep cutting corners until it becomes generally a circle. That's the first thing we want to go for. We want to turn this square into a circle. After carving it into a circle, then I'm just going to cut some little indents into the top. I don't know, for flavor. I just don't want it to be completely flat. And then we're going to sandpaper it. Remember, mask, be safe. These little buggers get into your lungs. It's going to hurt. Now, in addition to the other tools I forgot to mention, I have a Dremel rotary tool. Now, this is very helpful for sculpting some specific, I guess, more natural rock formations. So I'm going to take this Dremel tool with the sandpapery edge, and I'm just basically going to drill just grooves into the stone, just to make it more natural and less blocky, and also to refine some areas. Alright, and now for the cardboard. What we basically need this cardboard, a thin cardboard by the way, we're going to use it for putting on the bottom of the terrain pieces. Now I'm going to use cardboard from this Intuit Bliss Foam pillow, which unfortunately I could not enjoy as I have giant thick legs and this thing could not possibly hold both of them. As such, I gave it to someone much smaller, but the cardboard is still good. Now with all the pieces cut out, refined or whatever, we then place them on the flat sheet of cardboard, and then we're going to just take a pen and we're going to mark out the basic shapes for these pieces. And then once all the pieces are marked out, we're just going to take some scissors, which I also forgot to tell you to use. Get some scissors or whatever cutting utensil and then just cut out these cardboard pieces. Once you have the pieces out, make sure to cut and round the edges of the cardboard because that just looks better. And then what you're going to do is you're going to apply a lot of glue onto the cardboard. Now I didn't know this at the start, so a few pieces are mismatched, but the glue goes better on the unprinted side. So the part where it's just pure cardboard and no logos or anything adheres better. So you're going to want to get this and you're going to apply the glue all over and make sure it's a thick bond. And what you're also going to have to do is once you get all your pieces glued, you want to apply pressure on top because over time the cardboard is going to warp a little, and so you need some pressure or weight on top to flatten them. And I eventually did that on top. Now this glue is going to take a while. This stuff doesn't adhere very quickly, so this is an overnight step. So make sure all the pieces have weight on them, they're secured, and then sleep on it. Come back to it the next day. The next day is now here for me. And so basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this Liquitex putty. Now at first I start off with a brush. Bad idea. I take it and then I apply it onto the parts of the cardboard, and I basically want to create a I want to fill in the gap. I don't want it to be a 90-degree angle between the foam and the cardboard. So I start off by filling the entire edge there, and I'll then use it to coat all the foam eventually. Now to speed up the process a little, I'm going to take a hair dryer and I'm going to hair dry the pieces. Now the putty will dry rapidly. Now if it's a thin layer, it'll solidify quickly, but if it's a thick layer, like a centimeter or two thick, it's only going to solidify the outer layer. But right now this is a very thin layer, so we're just going to basically heat treat this thing, and that will harden it quickly for our purposes. We'll be able to handle it better. And also I use the blow dryer on a lot of my models for drying them from washes and stuff, but I can never show it because I can't actually fit it onto the screen most of the time. Right now I have the camera blown way back or lifted high up so you can actually see it. So a hair dryer is a very good item to use for painting and modeling. Basically if you apply a wash to a model, a 15 or 30 minute wait becomes like 30 seconds to a minute. After realizing that the brush wasn't the best method for applying this because a lot of paste was wasted, I then give my terrain the finger for wasting a ton of my time with drawing, and I apply all the putty paste on with the finger. Now this actually applies much better, is much more accurate, and I'm able to focus the pressure better. So what we want to do is we want to coat the entire surface of the terrain in this. This is a base layer. We're going to use the ceramic stucco later, but not now. After having coated every single piece in a thin layer of the putty, I then sand some areas that, just maybe just a little too rough or too thickly coated. I then take the Liquitex ceramic stucco and I'm going to use it to coat a lot of the terrain pieces. Now what this is, it's basically the putty, however it has like sand mixed in or like ceramic or stuff. Gosh, you're just talking about this stuff again is making me cough again. Ugh. So basically what we want to do is we want to apply this mostly at the base so basically imagine this is rocks coming out of the ground. So the rock is going to go and reach and touch the bottom, and then that's going to be where dirt is, where grass grows or stuff like that. And so we want to apply this wherever we want, basically where you think mud is, or we want the ground to be disheveled or uneven. We don't have that much of this for the entire project, so basically use this where you think like there'll be like just patches of dirt and such, or maybe some parts on the stone where dirt could be at. So basically flat areas. I'm not going to put that much of this on the top areas, but I'm going to put a little bit on some areas. Depends. Just have fun with it, honestly. Just make your stuff unique. Just do what feels right. Yeah. Alright, upon completion, we have the entire thing done. It is sealed with putty, gives it a nice texture, there's stucco towards the bottom and such, and now we can get to painting. We're going to start off by taking our primer and we're going to spray paint everything. Now, because this is pink foam, it will melt and dissolve because the aerosol in the can, so make sure you seal up everything, otherwise you're going to destroy all your work. Also, you're going to spend an entire spray can doing this because there's a lot of terrain, there's a lot of surface area. This is an expensive project, I'll give you that. Now we're going to begin painting. So we're going to use these cheap paints, and there's a lot of terrain and I don't want to use any of my specialty Citadel paints or anything like that because there's just too much and it's just going to be too expensive overall. So the cheap paints are going to be useful. I'm going to start off with gray and then I'm going to mix some black with the gray. Since I want to do some different tones, darker, medium, and lighter colors, I'll mix in dark and then eventually white in to change the color, so I have basically 3 types of gray, or any shade of gray that I need. And we're going to start this as the base layer. Now we're going to focus on painting basically the top part because the lower halves are going to have to be colored brown, like dirt, and such. So we don't really need to cover the entire thing, just basically the top 2/3 of each terrain piece. And then once we have painted every single piece of terrain, this gray, we're then going to get, we're going to use some Bombay white ink, because it's cheap, plentiful, and we're going to mix it into the gray paint again, and we're going to create a light gray. And so what we're going to do with this is we're going to take this light gray, and we are going to dry brush everything, and we're going to add the rocky, colorful texture to everything, and it's going to look good. I then took the brown umber paint and then I watered it down a lot, and I then put it inside my airbrush, and basically what I did is I sprayed the bottoms of all the terrain pieces and like places where there could be dirt or stuff like that. And then basically I just added color, it just made it more natural and stuff. So we weren't going to use a brush for this. The airbrush applied it very well. And you can use this to try to change some colors or tones around, make it feel a little more natural. Just have fun with it, but it takes a while. And now we move on to applying the flock. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the gel glue, and we're going to take a brush and we're just going to apply it everywhere where we want the flock to be. And once we've applied a thick layer of the glue, we're just going to throw on tons of the flock. And then once that like is sealed in, we're just going to shake it a lot and make sure we get rid of all the excess. And you know what? That hair dryer is very useful. You can, after like you've applied the flock everywhere and you're pretty sure you shook off a ton of the excess, just run it over with the hair dryer and it'll get rid of the extra excess you didn't even know. That way your fine models, when they get nearby, won't be coated green with flock as you play with it for the first 300 times. Now the terrain pieces are looking good, but they could be better. Now here is where you're going to have to make your decisions. This is an expensive project, and a lot of these materials are pretty expensive, so going overboard is basically a bit more expensive, more money. So I'm going to push it a little further, and I'm going to take Agrax Earthshade, and then I'm going to use on my airbrush, and I'm going to airbrush Agrax Earthshade into essentially the recesses of the rock or other places, or onto the grass itself. And what this is going to do is going to turn the grass a more brown color in certain areas, and I can use it to blend in some places, and it's going to add some more depth and color to the models. But just know that it is a tad pricey, and the Umber paint can't seem to aerate or aerosol as well under the airbrush like the Agrax Earthshade can. So, well, what can you do? So. And so we've reached the end of this project. Now, this took around 3 days for me to do. Man hours, it was around maybe 10 or 12 hours of just the crafting and the labor. But the real issue was just the drying times in between. It just took a while. It's like several nights I just had to wait. So that was irritating. The other thing is, this project is mostly pretty expensive to do. The flock I've had for years, so I don't remember how expensive it was, but like the paste was expensive, the stucco was expensive, and getting a bunch of different colors of paint. Each of those tubes of paint was like $5 or $6 each, and so I could add more detail, more color, more stuff, more browns, more flow in, but I'd have to use some more high quality paint, and that's kind of expensive. So this was a battle of, I kind of think I could do more, better, but it's just like I reached that point, it's like too expensive, and I'm not really sure if it'll really work in the end. But the overall result is pretty good. The terrain serves its purpose. There's towers, there's not really impassable, but they block your movement. You can get on top of them. They can create choke points, and this is a good chunk of terrain. So looks nice, will work nice, pretty light, pretty cool. But well, my first foray into terrain. Maybe one day I'll get to 40k terrain. But now moving on to my next project. Now, I do have some Blight Lords to paint, and I still have my Glotkin that I have had for months and I have yet to touch because I am afraid I'm not good enough yet. However, something has happened. A box set that has, I guess, broken the Games Workshop section of the internet, made people hate scalpers for a while, but I managed to get my hands on one. Unfortunately, I am a mere peasant in a tiny YouTube channel, very tiny, and too unimportant to get one ahead of time. So I finally got my hands on one. I'm finally going to be able to begin to paint them, and I'll post videos of them, but it's going to be much later than everyone else who got the sets beforehand. So just so you know, everything that I paint on this channel I actually sell on eBay, because that's kind of how I pay for the hobby, because it's so expensive. This terrain, however, will not. I am keeping this. It ain't worth the hassle to make a second group. But soon enough, I will soon start with Indominus. I'm going to start with the Space Marines. I haven't fully decided what I'm going to paint them as, but so far, I think I'm going to start with the Space Marines that have the swords. Sorry, it's been a long time since I played 40k. Anyway, if you like what you see, like the video, share if you want to share it. Dislike it if you dislike it, whatever. Comment if you see anything you want to nitpick, and I will see you as soon as I can. I want to get to that Indominus right away.